What's up, everyone? I'm here at my NFL Week 7 DraftKings picks. This time we're going to be talking about some sleeper/value plays. If you haven't seen my main picks video that I uploaded on Wednesday, be sure to check the link in the description or click the link in the top right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the picks. Alright, so usually I wouldn't talk about two players at the same exact time unless I was doing a stack or something like that. But Giovanni Rogers and Mike Gillislee are in the same exact situation this week. They're both replacing their starting running back, who at least was somewhat expected to start. Doug Martin, I mean, some people were kind of expecting it, but I really didn't know. But LeSean McCoy was definitely a big surprise. Rex Ryan kept, downplaying his hamstring injury, and we just really weren't expecting this. So Gillislee, at the minimum price tag for running backs, has to be in some form of a cash game lineup this week. In fact, initially at the beginning of the week, it seemed like you were either going to pick LeSean McCoy or DeMarco Murray and pair them with probably Giovanni Rogers at the running back spot this week. Well, now you realistically can play both of these guys in cash games and not really feel bad about it because I think Gillislee is a little bit riskier because we haven't seen him actually take on a full workload yet. Unlike Jaquiz, where we've seen him get those 35 touches against the Carolina Panthers and make use of them. He was effective on the ground. He caught some passes. Catching passes is one thing that Mike Gillislee has never really done at all in his entire football career, at least, especially in Florida. He only had 23 career receptions at the University of Florida. That said, he only started every game his senior year, so he hasn't been asked to catch passes since he's been a Buffalo Bill because that's been LeSean McCoy's job. So I don't know if Gillislee's going to have that many receptions. I expect him to at least still have a few because they're probably just going to slot him into that entire LeSean McCoy role and hope it works out. But I think Giovanni Rogers is a bit safer because you kind of have that guaranteed floor of 4 or 5 receptions, so that's going to be 4 or 5 extra points for you, plus on top of the receiving yards that he gets. But I mean, both these guys are such good plays. If you look at the matchups they have, I mean, it still doesn't change. They're still facing the 2 worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Jaquiz going up against the worst in the San Francisco 49ers, and Mike Gillislee going up against the second worst in the Miami Dolphins. So both these guys have really good matchups. If you don't feel comfortable playing both of them and you just want to go at one or the other and then maybe pair them with DeMarco Murray or somebody a little bit more expensive, that makes sense as well. If you want to play DeMarco and both of these guys, that makes sense. There's so many different routes you can go, but I think both these guys are really, really safe plays, not only because of the projection, the production we can expect out of them, but because of the price too. So both these guys are really, really good plays this week. Okay, so next up I have Pierre Garçon, and he too is a benefactor from an injury to one of his teammates, just like Mike Gillislee and Giovanni Rogers is. In this particular case, it's Jordan Reed going down with a concussion. He's going to miss his second consecutive game. Last week, without Jordan Reed, Garçon had 11 targets and 6 receptions, put up 13.7 DraftKings points against the Philadelphia Eagles. This time he's going up against a much weaker defense in the Detroit Lions. The Lions are allowing over 40 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. There should be more than enough points to go around to Pierre Garçon in this particular game. He's a great price. I don't really know if you're going to have to play him because of these cheap options you have at running back. And there's some better, just slightly more expensive options, I think, than Pierre Garçon, like a Terrell Williams or something like that. But Garçon is still a really, really good option. And, a lot of people were kind of confused on why he was doing so well without Jordan Reed. And, obviously the obvious answer is that Kirk Cousins just had less options to throw the ball to. But the other thing is that a lot of people are saying that Garçon is running similar routes to what Jordan Reed runs. So if they're running similar route patterns and in a similar part of the field, then it makes sense why Garçon is getting so many more targets and whatnot in the absence of Jordan Reed. So I think he's a good option. He's definitely a sleeper. He may be somebody you maybe want to go with a game stack in this particular game and stick him in there and hope it works out. So I think he's a good play. I would consider him in cash games if you have to go that route. Maybe if you don't feel comfortable with going with one of these cheaper, lower-end running backs and you want to pay up at running back or something like that, maybe this guy could slot into your flex or something like that. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about getting him in your lineup if you really, really want him there. But he's not a bad pick at all. Okay, so the next guy that I want to talk about is Mike Wallace, and he's a guy who's really flown under the radar so far this week, and it makes sense why, but I really think he shouldn't be. Everybody wants to talk about the Ravens' defense, and everybody wants to talk about how Geno Smith is terrible, and he's going to throw 20 interceptions in this game, and all sorts of different things, but the one player that they should be talking about is Mike Wallace, and the real big reason is because Steve Smith is not going to play. That's 15%, or at least we don't think he's going to play. I guess I should clarify that. And that's 15% of all the team's targets that have to go somewhere if Steve Smith does not play in this particular game. So obviously it's a little bit unrealistic to think that Mike Wallace is going to get all of that 15%, which is another reason why I like some of the secondary receivers for the Ravens, like, Brashard Perriman, Kamar Aiken, even, Dennis Pitta is going to get some more looks now, who's already been getting a healthy amount of looks regardless of whether Steve Smith plays or not. So I like Mike Wallace, against this Jets defense, who have been terrible against wide receivers this season. They've allowed over 1,200 receiving yards this season, which is second worst in the NFL. Only the Raiders have allowed more. They're allowing 42.8 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, which again is the second worst mark in the NFL. So everything is pointing towards a really good game for Mike Wallace. Should see a bump in targets. He's going to get some deep looks. I think some people are going to be scared away from Flacco as well because he hasn't practiced that much this week because he's been dealing with some kind of shoulder discomfort. So it looks like he's going to play, though. He practiced today. So, again, Mike Wallace is just a really good play, and I think you could get him at a pretty low ownership even though he has a great matchup. So next up I have Marcus Mariota, and I think he's my favorite sleeper on the week. I think, first off, you need to take a look at the past two games that he's had. He's faced off against the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns, so neither of them are particularly great teams on defense, but he's put up 30 DraftKings points and 28 DraftKings points, and he's had 7 rushing attempts at least in both of those games and at least 60 rushing yards. That's the big thing that I want to talk about. They're facing off against the Indianapolis Colts this week, who are probably a slightly better defense than those two teams, but not by much. And it's been well documented that the Indianapolis Colts struggle big time with running backs. Obviously, the Titans have a very good running back in DeMarco Murray and are going to look to feed him the ball quite a bit. But if we take a look at the quarterbacks that have faced the Colts this season, in Matthew Stafford, Trevor Siemian, Phillip Rivers, Blake Bortles, Brian Hoyer, and Brock Osweiler, only one of those guys has even slight rushing upside, and that's Blake Bortles. And in that particular game, he had 7 rushing attempts, 36 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. So in these past 2 games, we've seen Marcus Mariota actually start to run the ball quite a bit more. I don't know if that's actually by design or if he's just kind of tucking in and running a little bit more just because he wants to do that. I think it's a little bit of both, honestly, but I think that Marcus Mariota has quite a bit higher rushing upside in this particular game than he usually would. That said, it's also a good situation to actually stack Marcus Mariota with DeMarco Murray. You usually wouldn't do a QB running back stack that often because it usually is not a good game flow for a quarterback. But I documented in my Wednesday video at how many red zone targets DeMarco Murray is getting. So you have a high probability of Marcus Mariota throwing a passing touchdown to DeMarco Murray. And also, like I said, I really, really feel good about Marcus Mariota getting in the end zone on the ground this week. So I like that a lot. I also want to mention I want to talk about the quarterbacks who are priced around Marcus Mariota, because this is going to take away from his ownership as well, which is a good thing. Andy Dalton's the same exact price. Alex Smith's barely anymore. Blake Bortles right around that price. Jameis Winston's a hint cheaper. Kirk Cousins slightly cheaper. So all of these guys in tournaments are going to take away from Marcus Mariota's ownership. So I like playing Mariota this week. I'm going to play him quite a bit in tournaments. I think, like I said, I think it's a good spot to play him either by himself, stack him with DeMarco Murray. I like stacking him with Delaney Walker as well, who's not many people are going to pick Walker because he's coming off of a bad week. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about getting this guy in your lineup, and I think all of them are good strategic moves. All right, so last but not least, I have Giovanni Bernard, and I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of grasping at straws a little bit. There's not a ton of value out there this week at wide receiver and running back, But Giovanni Bernard is not a bad play. Now, I do think his ownership is definitely going to be higher than it usually is because he's going up against the Cleveland Browns, and people just love to pick on this Browns defense, which makes perfect sense. But still, that said, I do think a lot of people are going to be looking the route of Jeremy Hill. I think those people that are going to be picking him are really going to be hoping that they can just get away with a couple of 2-yard rushing touchdowns with him and, come away with, 14 or 15 point outing just on that, which, again, like I said earlier, makes perfect sense, but I just don't think I want to do that. Giovanni Bernard is a guy who has value in the passing game. He's a little bit more expensive than he probably should be, but he's been playing a little bit better these past few weeks. He's put up 15 points and 13 points in the past 2 games, and he exploded against the Pittsburgh Steelers, putting up 28 DraftKings points with 11 targets, 9 receptions, and 100 receiving yards with the receiving touchdown. So if he can do that and then maybe somehow sneak away with the rushing touchdown, which is so far-fetched, like it seriously is. Like in the past 16 games, he hasn't had a rushing touchdown. And that one touchdown that he had in the Pittsburgh Steelers game was the only touchdown that he's had in total in the past 16 regular season games as well. So I mean, you're not expecting him to get in the end zone. Anytime he does, you're really, really fortunate with it. That said, like I said earlier, he has a value in the receiving game, and that's the main reason you're picking this guy and hoping he can do some damage in a tournament lineup. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's picks. Really quickly, I just want to give out a big thank you to everybody who is subscribed and is liking my videos and is leaving nice comments down below. I really, really appreciate all of the kind words, and it really inspires me and motivates me to make more of these videos and to make them better. So again, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to stay up to date on my Twitter. I update all my picks just about as long as nothing changes, I don't talk about it, but if something does change, I'll give you guys updates. I try to stay up to date on injuries and all that good stuff on there. So be sure to follow me on there if you haven't, and yeah, I hope to see you guys here next week. Later.